Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Yes, good morning, Hilton. My name is Naveena Sadasivam, and I'm a reporter at GRIST. We're an award-winning nonprofit media organization dedicated to telling stories of climate solutions and a just future. And I'm here with the indomitable Hilton Kelley, an environmental justice leader from Port Arthur, Texas. He is, yeah, give it up for Hilton. He is the founder and director of Community in Power and Development Association, and Hilton really is a force of nature. He's been doing deep community work for more than 2 decades. Many of you may know that he is a Goldman Prize winner for his community work and is an advocate for environmental issues, environmental justice issues in Texas. But what you might not know is that after a stint in the Navy, he did stunt roles in Hollywood. So you may have seen him in Eddie Murphy's movie Metro or maybe Nash Bridges. And then you returned to Port Arthur after your time in Hollywood. So tell us a little bit, Hilton, about what brought you back to Port Arthur after your time in Hollywood.
Okay, well, first of all, good morning, everyone. What brought me back to the city of Port Arthur was the need for someone to speak up for the moderate to low income people of color communities in the west side of Port Arthur, which is right up against the refineries and chemical plants and chemical incineration facilities where we were forced to live during the Jim Crow era. But how it all started was I joined the Navy when I was 19 years old. I was in the service from 1980 to 1986, but I had active duty from 1980 to 84. When I got out of the service in 1984, I decided to stay in California and pursue a career in acting. In high school, I was in theater. I played football as well. But I fell in love with theater, and I ended up doing extras work. That's how I got involved. I was on Nash Bridges, did a lot of stand-in work, did some stunts and whatnot. But I took a sabbatical from that in 2000, and I went home to Port Arthur, Texas, just to visit relatives and friends and to go to the Mardi Gras. It was in February. And when I went back home to Port Arthur, which is located right on the Gulf Coast, I noticed that the air quality had a stench to it, like rotten eggs, and you could smell the chemical odors in the air, like when I was a kid growing up there. And before I ever left Port Arthur, I thought that was normal for the air to have that stench to it until I got to California, and things were a little different. And so I started wondering, why couldn't things be that way in my hometown? But I grew up hearing the language like, well, you know, that's money you smell in the air. My mother used to always say that. And a lot of folks in my town, most of them didn't live past 60 years old, that worked at those facilities, that lived in that African-American community. I mean, literally, we lived on the fence line. And so I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to make a change in how our economic system was in West Port Arthur, and I wanted to get that town back in an upward mobility swing and get rid of some of the dilapidated buildings.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, one of the things that I noticed from visiting you in Port Arthur is that people are being hit by 2 twin threats. So there's the petrochemical industry, and like you said, frontline community living in the shadow of these massive refineries, but you're also on the Gulf Coast, which is periodically getting hit by hurricanes. So what effect have you seen that cumulative burden of both the hurricanes and the petrochemical industry have on your neighbors, on your friends, and the community at large?
Well, when it comes to living in West Port Arthur, or Port Arthur period, and on the Gulf Coast, hurricanes is now a way of life. Growing up in Port Arthur, I remember the first hurricane I ever heard of was Hurricane Kelley back in 1965. I was born in 1960. I'm 63 now. I started doing this work in 2000. I was 39 years old. So now I've been in this fight for 24 years. I was very naive when I got into this work. I thought I can go into Port Arthur, help solve those issues, and head back to California, but nothing could be further from the truth. This is a lifelong mission, fighting for environmental justice and fighting for people's right to drink clean water and breathe, clean air. But living on the Gulf Coast has its challenges. It's very stressful. Every year we deal with the threats of hurricanes. We deal with the threats of flooding. We deal with the threats of homelessness, because many times when hurricane hits, for instance, the last big hurricane we got hit by was Hurricane Harvey. In 2017, Hurricane Harvey devastated Port Arthur, Texas. 80% of Port Arthur, Texas was inundated with water, even in what they call no-flood neighborhoods, so-called because we were on higher ground. But Harvey was an exceptional storm. And right after Hurricane Harvey, there was Hurricane Laura that was earmarked, they said on the Weather Channel, that was coming to Port Arthur, but it veered to the east and ended up devastating Lake Charles, Louisiana, which is right next to Port Arthur. Now, what comes with that when you don't get a direct hit from a hurricane, FEMA doesn't even look at your community, even though those winds basically still destroyed Port Arthur, even though it wasn't a direct hit. Roofs were torn off, okay? Gates were knocked down, windows were blown out, but yet we could get no support. And even to this day, many people are still living in homes that was damaged way back when Hurricane Rita hit, right after Hurricane Katrina. And like I said, growing up in Port Arthur, we didn't see many hurricanes. They always hit further south down in the Corpus Christi area. But now what we're seeing every year are at least 3 to 4 hurricane warnings a year. And the hurricane season starts, I think, around June, and it goes all the way up into October. And so the stress that brings to a community that is hurricane prone, that is flood prone, and not to mention the chemicals that get mixed in the flood waters, it's very, very stressful, and it's very, very difficult to deal with every year.
Right, so let's talk a little bit about those chemicals that you talked about. What effect have you seen on people's health in living both in an area that is, often hit by hurricanes, but also in the shadow of these refineries that when a hurricane hits, they are, sometimes leaking chemicals into the water, shutting down very quickly and emitting a lot of pollution into the air. What effect has that had on the people in the community?
Well, it's had a devastating impact on our health. As a matter of fact, many times when there's flood waters in the neighborhood, you don't have any choice but to get in that water and walk, because now your cars are useless, your trucks are useless. So in order to get to higher ground or to rescue vehicles, you have to get in the water. And sometimes that water has a sheen of oil in it, because what the groundwater that's on the plant ground sometimes wash into the community. And whenever you have flooding and you have hurricanes, well, the refineries and chemical plants have to go into what you call shutdown mode. And whenever they go into shutdown mode, what you see is these huge flares off the top of these derricks. I mean, sometimes it's like 20, 30 flares going off at one time. It almost looked like the invasion of Kuwait, if you will. And we live right next to the largest oil refinery in the Northern Hemisphere, which is called Motiva. Motiva put out 635,000 barrels of oil per day. And right next to Motiva is Valero. And right next to Valero, we have Chevron Chemical. Next to Chevron Chemical, we have Oxbow Calcining, petroleum coke facility. And next to them, we have Veolia Chemical Incineration Facility. We have Cheniere LNG, Sabine LNG. So the question must be asked, how much is too much for one community? And I must add, again, this is an African-American community where African-Americans were forced to live during the Jim Crow era, and we still live there today because it's many of what those citizens in that community have. I grew up in West Port Arthur, but yet we are disproportionately impacted by this onslaught of pollution and threats by hurricanes in our community, because it is a low-lying area, almost like the Mississippi Delta. And so we learn to survive in these areas, but yet at the same time, your body can only take so much. Moving back to the Port Arthur in 2000, to date, I've had at least 6 of my personal close friends perish from cancer. And I'd like to mention 1 or 2. Eddie Brown, you guys do not know him, but he was a pillar in the community. He was diagnosed with cancer in 2018, and he died in 2021, right after the big freeze we had in the city of Port Arthur. Also, Darlene Ford, very good friend of mine, classmate of mine, graduated in 1978. She passed away. Quite a few others have passed, and this is why I continue to fight, and this is what prompted me to get more involved and continue to push thus far.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. You said you've been working on this for more than 2 decades, 24 years. What changes have you observed in the community? Are things improving? Are there hopes? Are there signs of progress? Or what changes overall have you observed in the last 2 decades?
Well, I must add, some of the things that have changed for the better is over the years, we've had to use litigation to bring forward action. And my attorney, Jim Blackburn, who has worked with me for many, many years with the Blackburn law firm, we were able to bring lawsuits against Motiva, where we were able to get a $5.2 million settlement for the impacted community. We started a clinic on the west side of Port Arthur to help those people that have transportation barriers and other barriers to keep them from going to the clinic on the far east end of town. We have a development center, and I'd like to say many, many thanks to the then administration under Barack Obama. Lisa Jackson was head of the EPA during the time of this lawsuit back in 2012. And there was a consent decree that was posed against the Valero oil refinery. And that money that they had to pay due to some of the illegal emission releases, well, it went to the national treasure. But we spoke with the Environmental Protection Agency back then, and they agreed that some of that money should come back to the impacted communities that had to bear the brunt of all this illegal pollution. And with those funds that was allocated back to the community, we were able to build a clinic to help those people that are still in the community fighting for their lives. So that's one major thing, but at the same time, we also got the Valero oil refinery and Motiva to put in flare gas recovery units, sulfur recovery units, and also now they've come into compliance because of our actions. So we're very excited about those accomplishments.
That's excellent. That's really great. I know you have a poem that you wanted to share with us. If you would like to, we'd love to hear it.
Well, thank you for that. Well, yeah, I mean, when I first moved back home to Port Arthur, I was so angry because, of all the odors that were still there, the dilapidated situation. Many of the kids were playing in the parking lots. And I was just so angry because we are on the fence line of billion-dollar-a-year companies, but yet our community is still behind in time. And the buildings are dilapidated, and there's a heavy unemployment, 14% unemployment. So one night, I was sitting in my little bungalow, and I heard this huge explosion. It was at one of the plants. And so I like to write, and I write poetry, and I wrote this one poem called My Toxic Reality to release some of the pressure that I was feeling. And I'm going to share that with you.
Absolutely.
My toxic reality. I see your smoke rising in the air, 2, 3 in the morning when you think no one is there. In the still of the night, my child starts to sneeze. In the still of the night, the other starts to wheeze. Your bright, bright torch, it burns all night. To find my way through the house, I don't even need a light. The roar of your flame I've learned to ignore, even though its combustion vibrate my feet up on the floor. Now, I know I live at the back end of town, and I should just be quiet and not make a sound. You might even find this a little profound, but me and my neighbors are a light and dark shade of brown. I hope our leaders don't conspire to circumvent, because these findings I have a sulfur benzene scent. Excuse me while I cough. My throat has a slight tickle. The air I breathe, it smells and sometimes very fickle. If you went to take a bath and saw a rash upon your chest, would you just shrug your shoulders and wish yourself the best? Because this money they give is great and this is only flesh. But if you had the right insurance, you could go and take a test. Oh, I'm scared I'll lose my job if the pollution I contest. But if you died tonight, would your killers confess to the poison they put inside you that laid you down to rest? Would your family have to fight to pay your doctor bills as you lay 6 foot under up on a grassy hill? Now your job is gone and your company grievance has faded. Your spouse and kids tried to collect from them, but they said your death was not job related. My toxic reality, my toxic reality, my toxic reality.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. We'll have to leave it there. A big round of applause for Hilton Kelley, everyone. Thank you.